Hi everyone, today we're going to be adding and subtracting decimals. Alright, so first thing you want to remember when you add and subtract decimals is that you need to line up the numbers so that their decimals are lined up. So we're going to write, line up the decimals. So like in this first problem here, we have 9.8 plus 2.12, so I'm going to rewrite this as 9.8, and then underneath it, I'm going to make it so that the decimals are in a line. Alright, so that's what they mean by lining up the decimals. Next thing we want to do is use zeros as placeholders if necessary. So you can see that the 8 and the 1 line up, but the 2 is not lined up with anything. So we can put a 0 here in order to hold a place and make it look like a normal addition problem. Because we know now about positive and negative numbers, you want to make sure if you're adding and subtracting with positive and negative numbers, especially when you're subtracting, like maybe this one is like a regular subtraction problem, but like down here on number 4, you're subtracting from a negative number. We're going to go ahead and rewrite that as an addition problem first and then find the answer. It's just easier so you don't lose track of those negatives. So when we get there, we're going to use copy, change opposite, or add a line, change a sign, however you remember how to change subtraction to addition. After we take care of that, we're going to add or subtract as we would normally. Sorry, I got something in my throat. And the last step is to bring down the decimal point. So you're going to add like regular whole numbers, but in the end you have to remember where to put your decimal point. Alright, so let's go ahead and add these up. 2 plus 0 is 2, 8 plus 1 is 9, 9 plus 2 is 11, and then I bring down, I just drop it down. So this is 11.92. Subtraction, we're going to start with the same, by doing the same thing, we want to line up the decimal point. Now, if you look at 8, 8 doesn't have a decimal point, so we have to remember where to put the decimal point. So I could put it in front of the 8, but that would be 0.8, which is 8/10. That's not the same thing as 8 wholes. If I put the decimal on the other side of the 8, behind the 8, then what I still have is 8 wholes. So that's where it goes. 8 point, and then I'm going to line up the 1.65 underneath it. I need to fill in with zeros, so I'm going to put zeros here, and then I'm subtracting, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Be careful when you're borrowing, like in this one, I have to come all the way over here. That becomes a 7, this is a 9, and this is a 10. So 10 minus 5 is 5, 9 minus 6 is 3, 7 minus 1 is 6, and then my decimal drops down. So 6.35. Now, if this were a subtraction problem and the second number was larger than the first, then I might want to go ahead and copy, change opposite, rewrite it first as addition, and then figure out where my subtraction would be. All right, number 3, I have 11.013 and negative 232.6. Now this one's a little different because of the positive and negatives. Normally when I add, I can line them up in any order and it won't matter. But in this one, because I have a positive and a negative, the rules of positive and negative numbers tell me that when they're different, when they have different signs, I actually subtract the numbers. All right, so what I'm really going to do is subtract, and then I'll keep the sign of the largest. So before we find the answer, let's just figure that out. Is it going to be positive or negative? What is there more of? Well, don't just look at the number of the digits, look at the actual number itself. So this is about 11. Let's just estimate 11. This is about a negative 232. So if we just look at their whole numbers and ignore the decimal points, it's obviously that there's more negatives than there are positives. So I know my answer is going to be negative. I'm going to go ahead and write that down so that I don't forget the negative. Now, I need to subtract them because the signs are different. So I need to line this up. I'm going to line up my decimal, but which one is going to go on top? Well, in this case, it's the one that there's more of, okay? And we just decided there were more negatives. So I'm going to put the 232.6 on top and the 11.013 on bottom, and then subtract. Now, if I had switched these, it wouldn't work. I can't subtract 11. I can't subtract 232, sorry, from 11. And so it wouldn't make sense to subtract that way anyway. All right, fill in your zeros and then subtract. So again, I'm borrowing. This is a 5, a 9, and a 10. 10 minus 3 is 7. 9 minus 1 is 8. 5 minus 0 is 5. 2 minus 1 is 1. 3 minus 1 is 2, and 2. Drop down your decimal point. And so we don't want to forget about that negative. I'm going to bring it down here so it's negative 221.587. All right, in example 4, I'm subtracting a negative number. So the first thing I want to do is rewrite this problem as an addition problem first. And so this is going to be negative 12.4 because I keep that or copy that. Oops, that's a 4. Okay, I change subtraction to addition, and I change this to the opposite. So it's copy, I copied, I changed, and then I do the opposite. The opposite of 5.23 is negative 5.23. Or if I'm adding a line and changing a sign, I can think of it that way. All right, so now I have to decide, am I going to add these numbers or subtract these numbers? Well, look at their signs. They're both negative, and when the signs are the same, you add them and then you keep the sign. So is this number going to be negative or positive? Well, since these are both negative, our answer will be negative as well. And I'm adding them, so I'm going to line them up, and it won't matter. Normally I like to put the biggest one on top, so 12.4 and 5.23. I'm going to add them up. I'm going to fill in my 0 and then add. 0 plus 3 is 3, 4 plus 2 is 6, 2 plus 5 is 7, and 1, and bring down your decimal. Okay, and we don't want to forget our negative sign. My answer is negative 17.63. All right, so to kind of sum it all up, when we're adding and subtracting decimals, we want to make sure we're lining up the decimal point, filling in zeros. But we also need to pay attention now that we know about positive and negative numbers that we consider them before we add or subtract. So if it's subtraction, you might want to go ahead and rewrite it as addition first, and then you're going to have to look at the signs. If they're positive and negative, no matter what this says, if they're different, you're going to end up subtracting. Keep the sign of which you have the most of. In this case, it was negative. This started off as subtraction, but because we rewrote it as addition and they had the same signs, we ended up adding them. So you're combining two things you know, how to add and subtract decimals with adding positive and negative numbers. All right, see you soon.